Okay guys, so today I want to do something a little bit different. I want to talk about how you should use results from a major tournament to help you build your own deck. And I want to talk about what it means to be a good deck versus what it means to be a well-positioned deck. Or you can be both, or you can be neither. Now, for this, I want to focus on Tenpai as a case study. So if you were here mostly for the White Forest content, don't worry, there's a lot more of that coming. But we have a ban list in a few weeks now, and a lot of the stuff that people are talking about with White Forest is obviously going to change based on that ban list. So I don't want to do too much stuff that is just going to have to change immediately. But I know a lot of people are asking about Azamina stuff or even like the branded lines and whatever. So I am going to be looking into that. Anyhow, let's get to this. So the NAWCQ is still currently the only major event that we've had so far in the current format. And that is the context for the meta that we're in. Now, if you were playing at a locals, obviously you're going to have to adapt your deck to the context of that locals. But the context of this event was Fiendsmith Snake Eye had a 25% representation when the event started. So of all 2,000 plus entrants, 25% of those players were on Fiendsmith Snake Eye. And that 25% went to a 45% when we got into the top 64. Tenpai Dragon and Yubel were the only other decks that had more than just a couple players in the top 64, and their representation also increased, but by a very small amount. So basically what this tells us is not only is Snake Eyes Fiendsmith the best deck, but it's the best deck by far. And then Tenpai Dragon and Yubel are not the best deck, but they are positioned well enough in the meta that they can contend and top a major event. Everything else you see on this list is basically rogue, and the numbers are so small that you don't even know if this means that it's better than something that didn't show up here. So when you are deciding how to build a deck and you are going over results, you want to look at the topping lists, okay? You don't want to look at someone who says, oh, I got first place in my OTS or at Nationals. You want to look at a YCS or an NAWCQ because those are the top tier events that generally have higher quality players, and so you're going to have higher quality deck lists, and the better stuff will bubble to the top. Now, if you are somewhat familiar with Tenpai, you may be aware of there being a couple different issues that there wasn't consensus on. So how many copies of Fadra should you play? This is the one that when it's summoned, it brings one back from the grave. And it's very useful for recycling through your resources in a grind and also for performing the OTK. Now, if we were to just cycle real quick through these profiles, we see this guy is on 1 Fadra, this guy is on 2, this guy is on 2, this guy is on 1, this guy is on 1, this guy's on 1, this guy's on 2, etc. And so what that means is you shouldn't be worrying too much about whether to play 1 or 2. Those ratios are good enough that you can top a major event. So don't get hung up on stuff that doesn't really matter. What you need to be focusing on is what is the high yield stuff? What are the most important decisions that I should be making? Now, I'm not going to cycle through all, 10 or whatever of these profiles every single time I give an example, but I encourage you to look at this yourself on Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta if you want to validate any of the stuff that I'm talking about or have a more in-depth look yourself. But what you should be focusing on is what are the absolute most powerful cards that can be played. And D-Shifter is one of the most broken cards in the entire history of Yu-Gi-Oh! It is so powerful that even in the Tearlaments Tier 0 format, which was far more powerful than Snake Eyes Fiendsmith in the context of its meta at the time, D-Shifter still allowed decks like Fluandereeze to top and even win certain events, because if you were on Tearlaments, you'd have to hope that your hand could allow you to summon D-Shifter in defense and hope that the Flu player bricked or couldn't ODK you. So this card is broken. If you are playing any deck that can main this card, you should be maining this card. And this is part of what it means to be a well-positioned deck, being able to play an extremely powerful anti-meta card against meta decks. This alone will increase your win rate. It is also worth mentioning that this deck can OTK under both Prosperity and Shifter at the same time, although that is the scenario where you typically need Trident Dragion. Trident Dragion is otherwise not a necessity, even under Prosperity or under Shifter, but when you're under both at the same time, this card usually comes up. So that's just worth noting if you are a budget player, although I believe this is now confirmed for a reprint in one of the upcoming sets. Okay, another thing you should be looking into is what kind of non-engine are people playing? And one of the themes that you'll notice if you cycle through these decks is that a lot of people seem to be combining board breakers and hand traps. Now, if you have watched any of my previous videos on White Forest, you may be wondering, but I thought you said you should not be playing board breakers and hand traps together, especially Droplet. But here I'm seeing that some people are playing cards like Droplet, and they're also playing hand traps at the same time. Here's the thing. If you are playing White Forest, you are playing a multi-card combo deck where the bare minimum of cards required to play is 2, and you would prefer more. And the other cards in your hand have to be non-engine that allow you to play and not instantly lose the dice roll, or lose the game based on the dice roll. Tenpai is a completely different deck that can OTK off of literally a single card. So the downside of using hand traps, lowering your hand count, and then dropletting afterwards does not apply nearly as much to Tenpai as it does to decks like White Forest or Centurion. So what this shows you, being able to combine lots of these different non-engines together, is that this deck has a lot of flexibility. It has a compact engine. It can play extremely high impact cards. It can main deck Prosperity, which not every deck can do. And it can play cards like Raigeki, which are relatively good this format. And it also has some flexibility in the extra deck. So another thing you'll notice is that this guy is on Doolittle and 2 seals, but then you'll see that other people are on, let's see, so he's on Striker Dragon. This guy is on the Zealantis ODK package. A bunch of people are on that too, but not everyone. So that's how you know you don't need to buy those cards. Like, especially if you're a budget player and you see like, well, this guy in this profile said this was super broken. But if there's no consensus on it, you don't need to play those cards. But you do need to play the things that everyone is playing. So some other themes that you'll see here is that people are they are side decking Kokimeru Drago. Now, in Yu-Gi-Oh, if you have a losing matchup that is relevant, so it's a frequent occurrence in the meta, for Tenpai that would be Yubel, and there is a card that you can play that is a win condition against that deck, you basically have to play that card. Now, main decking this would be a brick, going first and second, depending on the deck that you're playing against. So usually people are siding this because this is a target off of seals. And remember that it is always better to side or main cards that your engine can access directly rather than things that you have to hope to draw. So because you can make seals with basically any hand in existence in Tenpai, it means that you can resolve Kokimeru Drago unless they have, like an Ash or what's it called, like a Called By or something like that. And so if this wins you the Yubel matchup, then you play this because the Yubel matchup is difficult. We also saw, this is one of those things that is, not everyone is on this card. So this is like potentially goo in the sense that it's really high impact, but not many people are on it. And these types of cards are often harder to evaluate because you're like, is this really good? Or did a guy who was really good just put in this weird card and happen to win with it? But this card is used against Yubel. So it's a hard matchup. It's something that you can hope to draw off of Prosperity. And it makes the matchup a lot easier. Now, if you know Yubel, please let me know in the comments. Do you think that this card could also be used if you were going second? And especially if you're playing cards like, like Raigeki and Lightning Storm, so that you could power filter and then, Raigeki or something, and it would stop them floating. How much utility do you think that has if you're going second? Or do you just think that you have to play it going first only? I'd be curious if anyone knows in the comments. So yeah, basically the main points here are look at high tier events only look at topic lists, ignore OTSs, preferably ignore nationals if you have the ability to do so. Look at World Championship qualifiers or YCSs. Look at what everyone is playing. Look at what people are disagreeing on where there's no consensus. Just play the most broken things, and then whatever the flex spots are, that's where you can put your creativity in if you want to be creative. But generally speaking, if you are not a very good player, I suggest you just net deck. And if you can gain any access to their replays or their gameplay or whatever, do that and just copy what they do. So I don't want this to be a long video, so I'm going to end here, but let me know if you have any feedback, if you want to see more content or less content like this, or if there are any other decks or themes or anything that I should cover. Anyhow, thanks for watching.